Welcome to Thoughts Roundup. Thank you for being with us today. Dr. C. Roy Angel, a pastor, a Baptist pastor from, I believe it was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He wrote 6 books, and I have them all. They were probably 60 years old or more. Kind of new books, for me. But anyway, Dr. Angel wrote one story, or had one sermon, or whatever it was, in his book about the halfway house. Well, he told about it. He said he had read the story from somewhere else. So I think it's good that we pass these stories around. Someone wrote it and he read it, and then here I am with it. So he was telling the story about the halfway house. It was a restaurant that was halfway up in the Alp Mountains. The restaurant owner said it was not a happy place because people would a lot of times maybe spend a lifetime planning to come. They'd climb up the mountain. Now, if you read this book and you read this story, you might find some things in it that's not there, because I have no doubt added to this story because I love the story. So just bear with me and listen to it my way. But he said that these people would come up there and it'd be so cold, and the door would open and they would all come in, and they were so tired and cold. And one of the first things they did was go to a big fireplace, and they would warm themselves by the fire. Then they would go over to where they were selling hot chocolate, coffee, wrap their hands around the mugs and drink something to make them warm. Then he said that they'd go back and warm themselves again. By that time, the guide knew who was going to go up there and who wasn't, who was going to finish the trip, because this restaurant was halfway up the mountain. But the guide, he couldn't let on that he knew who was going to go and who wouldn't. So after a while, this few people would go and look up at the top, the summit, because there was a picture window up above and there was a picture window that looked back down below. Well, these people would go press their noses to the window looking back down, and that was the big part of the crowd would do that. But the ones that went and pressed their noses to the window up, that was the ones that was really going to go. And so after a while, the guide would say, "Okay, folks, it's time for us to go." Well, these that had pressed their noses to the window up, they stepped out. Then one by one, the ones that were not going to go on up, they would make excuses to the guide and tell them that this is the highest we've ever been. This is high enough for us. Things of that nature. They were satisfied with halfway. And so the door would open and the few would step out into the blizzard and look and make their way to climb on to the top. He said after people, the ones that didn't go, they would become dejected. They had had too much hot chocolate and coffee and didn't need any more. They were overly warm. They had regrets. They went to the window and talked about how far they'd come and how that they were higher than most anybody had ever been that they knew, and this is enough for us to tell our family about and so forth, our friends. But after a while, they were just dejected and wished they had gone. Well, nobody would go up to the window that looked to the top. They wouldn't go. They just wouldn't look. But he said finally, after a while, somebody would invariably go to the window that showed the peak of the mountain and say, "They're there, they're there." And some of them would come and look, and they regretted so much. Well, so many times the pastor guide has to say to his church, "Come on, folks, it's time to go on to the top. It's time to go on to the top." He knows a lot of people will not go, but he has to make out like that they're all going to go. Let's go, folks. But you hear people say, well, a lot of people don't live as good as we do. We live pretty good. Yeah, we don't do this, we don't do that. But there's a mountain peak that we need to look to, a mountain experience for the Lord. We need to go press our noses to the window and get it in our hearts that we're going to go on up. We're going to go on up to the top of the mountain. Halfway is just not far enough. Hosea was talking and said, Ephraim is as a cake not turned. In other words, it's done on one side and raw on the other. It might be edible, but it's not delicious. We want to do everything that we know to do. If we do everything we know to do, I'm sure that's worth a lot to God. But if we don't do it, he that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. Thank you.